Mr. Farrugia, thank you for joining me today.
Hey man, thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, I you were one of the first names that came to mind when it came time to start planning out the entertainment part of this. Um, if you've been following this channel, you know that we've got a director that we had on. We had a screenwriter, trying to get an actor. It's sort of still TBD, but post production is the last remaining arm of that, and so very excited to have you. For those who aren't familiar with post production, if you wouldn't mind just starting by telling us what actually goes into post production. I think a lot of people, when they hear post production, they think of an editor by himself in a room. So please educate the audience.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of like the stereotype. Post-production is the final part of like a three-part race, a triathlon. There's pre-production, that's casting, writing, location scouting, etc., etc. There's production, that's production, that's cameras, sound, lights, etc. Then there's post-production. That is everything that comes afterwards. That is the visual effects, that is the actual editing, that is the sound, the music, the scoring, all of that. Everything that happens after you film is post-production.
Got it. And I think I've heard it mentioned before that a film can fail in three different places. It can fail on the pre-production, it can fail on the day of the shoot, or it can fail in post-production. So I always find it really impressive, the movies that I've really enjoyed, when all things really just are locked in, because it seems to be almost like a happenstance success most of the time, to really just to have a situation where all three of those things just work flawlessly together. And I'm
That's
sure you can speak to that as well.
oh yeah. I mean, that's one of those things where it's like what you said, a good movie is good in it's good in production, and it's good in post. That doesn't mean there's no problems. Obviously, that's not how the world works. But a movie can fail because of the actions of what happens in any one of those three stages. And post production is, that's the marathon. That's where, for generally over a year, you're working on a show that you're finally fine tuning it, you're crafting it like it's a diamond, polishing it. Like that's where you really make a movie or TV show shine, is in the post production. And something goes wrong with that, it all falls apart. And and I feel like especially lately with some not so great box office, you've seen that. You've seen some box office movies that just haven't been to snuff.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, well, first, let's back up a bit. We both went to the same film school. Did you always know that this was something you wanted to get into? And upon whenever you made that determination, what was your path to ultimately working up in LA as an assistant editor in the union? Because I think for a lot of people, even film students, it's not immediately obvious how you go about doing that. So if you wouldn't mind just starting with kind of the origin story and how you figured it out.
So yeah, man. I mean, in college when you and I met, I was already set on being an assistant or being an editor, and going up to get to that goal. In high school was actually where I made the decision that post was what I really liked doing. In high school, I used to write short stories, so actually wanted to be a screenwriter. And with that, my school had a film class, and my high school film teacher told me, she was like, "Hey, you are one of my best editors. Have you ever thought about having a career as an editor?" And I was like, no, not really. I don't really want one either. Like, I want to be a screenwriter. That's what I want." And she was like, "Huh, okay. So she actually ended up making a project for the entire class that was like researching a career in film. And she told me, she was like, "I want you to research editors." And I was like, "No, I'm going to research screenwriters." If we her and I went back and forth, and she actually made me do both. So I got double the amount of work. That was great.
Yeah.
But from that research project, I actually ended up realizing editing is exactly what I want to do. It's for the film industry, it's stable. Like I said, you can generally work about 6 months to a year on a project and be paid very well. You and also it's like you craft the story. You get the footage from the Daly's house and you process that into what we watch on TV, Netflix, movie theaters, etc.
Well, so what did it for you? Like what either turned you off from screenwriting or just like made you want to pursue post? What was it about post that you enjoyed?
So it was two things. I mean, for what kind of turned me off from screenwriting was realizing how like all or nothing screenwriting is, and I know that you know that, and you talk to Pete about stuff like this, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things. You could work your entire life, sell one script, and you're good, or you can work your entire life, never sell a script, and you work at Starbucks until you're like 65. And that was really scary for me in high school. Was the idea of that? I was like, ooh. But what got me into post was post production. It's like I was a bit of like a Lego kid, so it was like kind of sitting here like the building blocks of like you sit here, you get this footage that's already captured, and how are you going to make this footage work for this cool project, this cool thing that people are going to sit here and love. People, you sit here and work on a Marvel movie, and people are like, "Oh, this is great."
It's
Right?
sort of like the parameters lend themselves to the creative part of it in a certain
Yes.
sense. Yeah, because as a writer, sometimes I feel like when you sit down to come up with an idea, or let's say you started an idea and you don't know where it's going to go. Well, that's just it. There's no parameters. You don't know where it's going to go, and it's almost like the I forget the actual term for this, but just like the paradox of options, whatever
Yeah.
you or paralysis
Yeah.
of choice. And so I could see why post or editing a film rather would be its own sort of interesting creative version of that, where you're given what's already been shot, and then from there maybe it's easier to find that direction into what it is that you or how you see it kind of unfolding on screen. So that's really interesting. So you moved to LA after school, and it's always tough. Like, spoiler alert for people who don't know,
Oh yeah.
those first months, we lived through that. But talk about that first too. Like, what were you trying for initially? Were you disappointed? What were you expecting?
So okay. So expecting, that's always a hard question because it's like you sit back and it's like, oh, I don't expect to sit here and get offered a Steven Spielberg project right out of high school or college. But I mean, for me personally, it took a year. It took 12 months of me just being in LA. And for those who like don't know everything about me, I actually worked at a paint store for the first year in Los Angeles. And this is right after college. I was working at a paint store, and I remember hitting my 1 year anniversary at this paint store. And honestly, it wasn't fun. I didn't expect to be at a paint store for a year. I was like,
You
a
got a
year.
degree,
Yeah, I have this degree that I'm not using. I'm working at this dead end paint store. I'm, like in the same dinky apartment. Like, there was no growth. But what I didn't realize was that, and like this is the industry, this is post production, production, pre production. Doesn't matter if you're trying to get into the industry, this is what it is. You're planting seeds. I was meeting people, I was talking to people, I was planting seeds with people, and it took, maybe it took maybe like 14 months for after me leaving college, moving to LA to actually get my first job working in film.
Which was
That was the Misery Index, which is a game show that is no longer airing, but it was a game show with the Impractical Jokers.
that's right. Yeah, that was the
So
show they were executive produced.
yeah, they were executive. They were like they were all hosts, and there was Jamila Jamil from The Good Place. So it was Jamila Jamil and the four Impractical Jokers. And they, they're executive producers, and they all like the stars of it, and then they got like contestants. It's a game show,
And that was that non-union assistant editor stuff, or was it PA stuff
and that was
initially?
non-union post PA, which
Okay.
generally a post PA is you're getting getting lunches, getting the coffee, doing paperwork. But because this was non-union, they could actually have me on the Avid. I was essentially an assistant editor. I just didn't have the title of one. And this is like a
And
fun.
Avid, for people who don't know, is like the industry standard for
Yes.
for editors.
Yeah, it's the NLE. It's just non-linear editing. It's the NLE software that 95% of the stuff you watch is cut on Avid. There's like for Premiere Pro, the biggest thing that comes up right now is the first Deadpool movie was cut on Premiere Pro, and I actually have, and Aaron and I both know this, but I actually have friends that worked on that project, and there was a lot of technical issues that happened with Premiere Pro.
Yeah, Premiere Pro was kind of like heralded at our film school for being sort of the standard, and it was always referenced that it was used to edit Deadpool. And you aren't, in fact, the only person who's told me like what a logistical disaster using Premiere Pro was for that film. But so Misery Index, and then so that was your first gig. And for me, like after my first gig, I think it was another like 4 months before I found something else, and it was just kind of a waiting game at that point, because you're like, how can I leverage this 1 inch through the door that I have? What was sort of what did it take for you to start getting regularly placed with productions?
So and this is where post-production is very different than like you, and like you worked in production. Post-production is very different in the sense like I was working in an office. It wasn't just like, oh, you're a day player on a set and the set runs for a week. It's like, no, I'm spending months in an office. So that's great because for two reasons. First off, it gives you a chance to meet everyone you work with and make connections and like build up.
Which is like the entire basis of the industry for people who don't know. It's like who you know.
Relationships is everything. Relationships is literally like, to back up for a minute and just talk about relationships. I got almost every job I have because I knew someone. Almost there's one job that comes to my head right now that I got from like a job posting.
And so that like when you because you worked for Marvel, you went to Atlanta for that. That was a referral as well then?
Yes, that was my mentor, a man named James. He really got me, especially once I made this transition from unscripted reality television to scripted like TV shows. He was the man that made that happen. Which, and again, relationships.
Yeah. So how important is a resume at the end of the day, would you say?
The resume is still important. It's still hard for me. Like if someone were to message me right now and it's like, hey, Matt, I've only worked on my buddy John Paul's short film, and I have no real experience, but I really want to work at Marvel. I'd be like, okay. And even if I really got to know this person, it's hard for me to present a resume that has nothing on it to somebody. And that's to where it's like, that's why it's like, my first scripted show, they really had to like take a chance on me.
Do you think for some people, because I've certainly heard this before, there's an element almost of faking it till you make it with some people that you've encountered? Like some people, like when they first had to start, I mean, they kind of had to assume the role of a professional, even though they had no credits to their name. Like at a certain point, everyone has to take that plunge, right? And suddenly they're a professional.
Everyone has to take that plunge. Fake it till you make it. I have a problem with that. saying in general, because fake it till you make it can get you. It's gotten me into trouble.
Mm.
Fake it till you make it. Yeah, like be confident in yourself, but don't lie.
Don't
Don't lie
oversell.
and tell you that. Yeah, don't lie, or don't be like, oh, I can handle that. That's no problem. And it's like, then oh, now it's actually happening, and the person's looking at you, and they're like, you told me you could do this, and you're like, well, I don't know everything, and then it just becomes like a more awkward situation, because then it's like you have to get someone to help you either inside the production or outside of the production. If it's outside the production, that's like, because NDAs, you don't want to bring people on just to like mentor. That's not really like a thing that people do. But like, it's like one of those things, like if you got like a show, like working as assistant editor, you could call me and like, hey Matt, what's sub clipping and what's this and that. But it's one of those things like to sit here and be like, oh, I have to have Matt teach me how to sub clip. That would definitely, like, everyone would like raise an eyebrow at you and be like, I don't have the confidence that you can do this anymore. That's why it's like, for me, I would not say fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
But like that doesn't mean give up. Like, there are resources out there that you can learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Not on the job. And then when you get on the job, it's like, yeah, I've done this like within like a tutorial standpoint. I've done this within, like learning how to do it, but like this is me actually putting into practice.
It almost sounds like, though, what you're saying is it does kind of come down to being likable.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
some people can look at that resume and, they'll say, well, you don't have the experience. You've done the tutorials, but God damn it, I like you, Matt. So we're going to give you a shot on this. How many conversations have gone like that for you?
Oh, a lot, especially in the beginning. It's like, you seem like a really nice guy. So this is one of the first things that was told to me when I was actually still in college on an internship, and the assistant editor told this to me. He said, if I have a choice between working with someone who is a complete newbie and knows nothing, and I have to teach them how to do everything, but they are a great person to be around, they're cooperative, they're attentive, they're trying to learn, or someone who's a master of Avid, is a master assistant editor or master editor, or top of their class,
And a jerk.
and a total jerk, I'm picking the first guy every time. And that's how just about everyone feels. I've never met anyone that sits here and will tell me they picked the latter. I've never met that.
Yeah, and reputation is also everything too. So the people that do carry themselves like that, I mean, word does get around pretty quickly. I mean, it's a small town. After so many productions, you're going to start recognizing people again, and that's when those conversations happen. So when you started working in the post field professionally, what was the learning curve of that from film school?
So, I mean, when it comes to from film school, like our film school, at least, I can only speak on the experience like Aaron and I had, because we went to the same film school. Our film school is very much teaching us like the theory of editing, which the truth is nobody cares about your theories of editing. Nobody, like, first, like, to be fresh out of college and editing something, you're not editing Breaking Bad. You're not editing House of Dragons or Better Call Saul or The Marvels or any. You're like, if that's what you're thinking, I hate to break it to you, but it's not going to happen. You're going to be a post PA. You're going to be an apprentice. You're going to be an assistant for years before getting to the editing chair. And that's just how it goes. One of the biggest disservices, and you kind of touched on this briefly, was our film school and other film schools too teach us Premiere Pro. Well, if they taught Avid Media Composer, which is what's used in the industry, we could sit here and be familiar with this terminology that, that terminology is half the battle. Even today in the show I'm working with, I use different terms than some of the people I work with, and that we still have to sit here and like translate for each other.
So I would imagine you're probably grateful then, because prior to attending the university that I also went to, you were trained in Avid in community college, if I recall,
Yes.
and you were spared probably some amount of pain upon going into LA, because you already knew from community college that Avid was what people were on. So,
Yes.
but for the average person who's got no idea, no connections in LA, and they're put in front of Premiere Pro, I can imagine it'd be a rude wake up call for
Oh
some
yeah.
people.
And I mean, I feel that's why we see a lot of young film students going into commercials, going into short form content, because for that stuff, Premiere is great. But if you're trying to sit here and get into even reality television, it's on Avid. One thing like I'm gonna sit here and say is that's like your college degree doesn't really matter. Like the truth is, you can become an assistant editor, you can become anything within the post production sphere without a degree. I know people that have like architectural degrees and have psychology degrees, and they never study post production, and they're doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things I found kind of sad from a standpoint of I just spent years of my life in film school, and now everyone up here is telling me I didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Everyone's telling me they kind of found it by accident. How many of those conversations have you had where people are like, "Oh yeah, I was a construction worker and my uncle was the DP on this show, so that's why I'm here now." And
Yeah,
like,
I mean, there definitely is some level of like I don't want to say you use the word nepotism, but like, oh yeah, I just kind of fell into it. I will say Post has a really good way of weeding those people out, because with the long hours and you're sitting in an office, well, now you're usually sitting at home, but like, we're going back to the office more and more. Post can get very mentally draining, and that does cause a lot of people who don't want to be here to leave.
mhm,
One thing that's nice about post production is generally everyone who works in post production cares, and like this is their career. They're not just like, oh, I'm doing this for the shits and giggles of it because this is funny.
yeah,
It's generally, and that's of course, there's always people who are like, I'm just here to get a paycheck and go home. And for those people, they get through. It's one of those things. I don't know if I would do this job without loving it.
yeah. And while I mean, you wouldn't call it nepotism, but you would still say it'd probably be important to have like mentors
Oh
in
yeah,
your life.
yeah. Mentorship is huge. One thing I'm very grateful with the post production community is, in general, the post production community will mentor. You get a message from a young person who wants to be an assistant or an editor, or work their way up. Generally, people will respond. Not everyone will, but you can only do so much. But generally, people will respond.
And there's a lot of meetups too. I
Oh
recall
yes.
like every other week when we were living together, you were going out every weekend and meeting with some of these guys. And I went to a couple of them, and I was struck by how open people were in
Oh
the post-production world. Whereas, in the writing world where I was trying to break into, people seem a bit more reclusive. Maybe there's a little bit more ego involved. And so, yeah, I did find that surprising.
yeah.
But I mean, all the more power to somebody that is able to navigate that and develop connections quickly. I think it's a great space to be if you have that kind of personality. Did you feel like you already had the kind of maybe assertiveness or personality for networking, or was it something you felt like you had to work on and sort of train yourself into?
So my mom would tell you if I've always been this way. I feel like I had to train myself. I would describe myself as an extroverted introvert. I do find it like how introverts do. I do find it draining to be around people for a long time. but I've learned to be able to like, yo, like let's soak up the energy of the room and like boost myself with that. But it's like, and it all comes in waves, especially like, I think when you and I were living together, because I was very hungry for it, I was able to sit here and do these monthly, bi-monthly, weekly meetups and meeting with people at coffee shops and doing all this stuff. To be honest with you, lately I just have not had that same energy, because it really does get draining. Like it's
Well,
almost.
you were hosting your own too. I remember you were organizing some.
Well, yes, I was. For a while, I was hosting meetups just to try and get people around our age more connected. And yeah, that's also organizing is rough.
So let's get into some of the meat of these shows and that you've been a part of, both union and non-union. What productions have stuck out to you as ones that you really enjoyed or had really memorable moments, and then maybe negative, but what were some of the ones that you think of, looking back, as having significant effects on you in either a positive or negative way?
So I mean, I think beginning is the best place to start. The Misery Index, like we talked about earlier, was a really great experience. I was working in office. They actually kept
You
me
were
on
stealing Keurig pods, I'm sure.
Diet Cokes, but yeah. But no, I mean the people I worked with were fantastic. So what I said earlier about, even though I was a post PA and working as an assistant editor, I didn't have the title of assistant editor. They actually gave me the pay of assistant editors, so I was paid more than the normal post PA.
Wow.
So that was really cool.
How did that work out? Did somebody die?
Well, no. So actually, okay, let me explain this, because this is kind of a funny story. I was a post PA. To join the union as an assistant editor, you need 100 days of working as a non-union assistant. So I went to my boss and I was like, hey, I will keep the same pay, but can you change my classification to where I'm a non-union assistant? And he was like, let me get back to you. A couple of days later, he comes into my like office and he's like, hey man, so can't get you that classification, but I got you the pay.
Like, and you're just like, even better.
Well, I was like, that's literally the reverse of what I wanted. I wanted the classification. I don't care about the pay. I was able to survive off the post PA wage. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and say no to more money, but like, I was like, that is literally the exact opposite of what I wanted. So, but I was that, I appreciate the money. I took the money and I continued working there. COVID happened, and before COVID was a thing, I was actually going to be let go of end of March, beginning of April. But the company was like, hey, because things are so crazy, we're not going to like lay anyone off in these times.
Yeah, you were one of the few people I knew that somehow finagled a working position throughout pretty much the duration of the pandemic, right?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And we can talk about that, because I talked about it briefly with Jonas, the producer I had on a few weeks back. But and he seemed to think there was sort of a job boom during COVID. But I remember days when you and I would talk about how the city was basically trying to force post-production offices to stay closed, and they would threaten to cut off utilities to buildings. People that wanted to work in post had to sneak hours in, like, against the city. Like, talk to me a little bit about that experience.
So, I mean, COVID was definitely, like, for anyone who lived through COVID, and that's just about everyone at this point, unless you're like 5 years old, it was crazy. It was weird. There was a lot of stuff going on. There was a COVID job boom. Like, I do know that there were people, like, kind of like after the initial first few months, there was a boom that happened because everyone was staying at home. We all started working from home. And once we figured out the whole work from home thing, That's when things really took off. From March to like June or July, things were weird. People were put on like indefinite hiatuses. There was like this, like, we don't know what's going to go on. We don't know when you're going to come back into the office. And then it was just like, okay, well, we're going to set you up with an iMac and a desk. We're going to put it in your house, and, you know, you're going to do your thing. And once that happened, then there was a definite, so I agree with Jonas, there was a definite job boom, like, after the first few months of, like, pandemic. As far as, like, you know, it made a lot of things harder. As someone I was trying to learn and I was trying to grow, doing that in COVID was very difficult because I didn't have the ability to step out of my office and talk to my editor or talk to another assistant and be like, hey man, I did this wrong. Can you help me figure it out? And they come over into my office and we fix it. It's like, if they were available, they would answer me back. And then it's like, okay, let's do like a Zoom link. And then it's like, you got to do a Zoom, you got to share your screen, and they're looking at their computer screen like this. They can't see anything. And then it's just like, I don't know what's going on, man. I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, buddy. And like I got to go back to my own work. Mm-hmm. And that was, so it was like one of those things. Learning during COVID was rough. Learning during COVID was definitely a challenge, and it became like very much like you had to be a self-starter. You had to sit here and like figure it out on your own. And I think that's where a lot of people struggled, because there were a lot of people that were like, oh, like, I'm not getting like mentorship, which is, you know, and not mentorship in the fact of like, oh, I need like I need like a sensei or like a teacher. It was mentorship in the sense of like, I don't know what I'm doing and I need to learn how to actually do the job.
Yeah. So going, yeah, and I know it kind of varied depending on what department you were in. I mean, I remember on the production side, all of a sudden there was a COVID safety department, and there were people that were, you know, mask officers on set. I don't know if I would comfortably include that on a resume per se. It's like, I'm the mask officer. But you know, it was good work for people, and you know, they had to be on every set, and that was like a union thing. And I think there was a conversation about having like COVID safety become like a union of some kind, because people weren't sure how serious it was going to get. So you got through that. What other productions did you particularly enjoy? I mean, Marvel, you wouldn't stop talking about working for Marvel. Could you describe the difference between working for Marvel and other companies?
Yeah, so I mean, real quick, just because you brought up the mask officers in the office from the Misery Index, when I did end up going back to the office, I would be on another, like the same floor, but on the opposite end all by myself. And I used to have the mask officer come over to my half of the floor and tell me to wear my mask. That was a fun memory. That was great.
That was actually me. That was my job. You just didn't recognize me because I had triple layer masks on.
You know, like, it was kind of like Bane. Nobody cared who I was. So I put on the mask, right?
Right. That's really good. That's actually very good. Yeah. So Marvel.
Yeah. So from Misery Index, I worked a couple other shows, and I got myself into scripted. And there's more shows for me to talk about in between, but Marvel is a big ticket item. I was just getting off of Apple TV's Masters of the Air, and my mentor James hit me up, and I was like, "Hey, I know someone who's looking for an assistant again. Her name's Tanya. She's British. She's going to be working for Marvel." Her and I met. We did a Zoom call. You know, I'm in LA. She's in London. And we connected. So she put me through to the Marvel producers. And I was like, I want this guy to be my assistant. Well, I ended up having a very fortunate situation because my editor was in London, and the time difference between London and LA was so much, and they were filming in Georgia, so they had office space in Georgia. They ended up flying me out from LA to Georgia. And I stayed in a hotel for about a couple months. then I actually was able to get I was able to rent a house, a 3-bedroom house in Georgia to myself.
They even gave you, I think, a Marvel issued golf cart, if I'm not mistaken.
So they didn't give it to me, but the keys are in the office and I could take it whenever I wanted. But they gave me a car. They rented a car for me. So I had a Nissan Versa that I just used to take zipping around Georgia. And this is another. I don't even know if I ever told you this, but they used to reimburse my gas. So I just gave them my gas receipts, and I got like additional checks added to my paycheck.
Wow. Okay. Well, why wasn't I alerted about these vacancies? No, but so, but how does the workflow maybe differ from other productions in LA?
So
how does Marvel prefer to run things?
So first off, just the Marvel way of doing things. Marvel is lock and key. Marvel is very, they like, you don't use your own computer at all. Like, you do not have a computer. You use their computers. You log into their server, and you use their email address that they give to you. So I had a Matthew Farrugia at marvelstudios.com
Oh, that's sick.
email address. And it's just like, there is no way for you to send stuff back and forth. You can't send a script to yourself. You can't send a video clip to yourself. They truly do make it impossible.
Unleakable, basically.
Yeah, as much as they can. And you go into Marvel, and like, there's always paperwork at the beginning, but the Marvel paperwork is like a stack. It's like,
NDAs and stuff.
NDAs. Basically, if you tell anyone what you're working on, you are in trouble. Back when I was working on Marvel, I asked them about, like, hey, can I do like a fan podcast? Because I had a friend that wanted me to go on this fan episode, just talk about working in Marvel, kind of like what I'm doing with you right now. And they're like, we need you to wait 6 months until the project comes out.
Wow. Or else they're going to put you in the Mickey Mouse jail at Disneyland.
Yeah, I mean, the mouse himself will come with a bat at my door.
Exactly. So okay, so lock and key, but like pretty dialed that as a post-production office.
It's a well-oiled machine. Anything you need, done, handled. The Dailies house, Marvel has their own Dailies house that they work with. Like, it's like Marvel owned. Anything you want them to do, I want the clip to be colored red. I want, this and that done. I want to be named this way. Done. No argument, no back and forth. You just tell them what you need. And there's no like, oh, well, that's just going to add more time. It's like, done. Got it. That's what you want. Understood. I mean, so working at Marvel was a really cool experience, because it really worked out to just really, like, they made sure that there was no reason the job couldn't get done. If you were having computer issues, there's an IT hotline. IT guys are there in like 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not just like one IT guy. It's like there was like 4 or 5 of them. So there's never an excuse.
Well, and so before that, the Masters of the Air show that you worked on, I recall that, the workflow being quite a bit different, where they sent you basically all the equipment you needed. You had like a little post-production suite in your house, basically. Yes. Do you prefer working in like the office setting, or did you like when you were just at your house in your pajamas, just like editing with all this tech that they sent you?
I mean, that's a great question. My current show, I'm actually doing a hybrid. I have in a different room, I have a whole setup just like the one from Masters of the Air. But on Wednesdays we go into the office, and I appreciate going into the office on Wednesdays because I can sit here and talk to my coworkers and like, oh, hey, I don't know why this wasn't working for me. Can I get some help? And then they can look at my Avid and they can be like, oh, that's why it's not working. It's because this is messed up. And it's like, oh, it's like what I was telling you about like earlier. I personally believe that hybrid is the best way to do it. We sit here, we work at home 3, 4, 2 days a week, and go into the office the other half of the week. It's because there's, I mean, there are times where I do want to stay in my pajamas and just get the work done, especially when it's a day that's like I already know what's going to happen on Monday. Tomorrow, I already know what I'm doing for work. So the fact that I can just get out of bed, log on to my computer, and start doing it, that works out great. I don't have to deal with traffic. I don't have to deal with, getting dressed, really. Like, just go. I will say I have heard from a lot of my peers in the industry that for post-production, we are going back into the office more and more. Like, even the show I'm currently on, in the fall, we're projected to be 100% in office.
Wow. Okay. So they're over that. They want to start.
Yeah.
Is that like the industry kind of across the board? You get that sense, or
At least for post production, yeah. I do think, and I don't think the union is really. I don't think that's a union of like objective is like maintain work from home. From what I've understood from the union, it's just like, especially with the last year and the strikes that have happened, it's like we just want to get people working again, whether it's in the office or work from home. The union's focused on that.
yeah. So you touched on kind of a key topic there. That was another one that that Jonas and I talked about. But I'd be curious to get your sort of perspective as an assistant editor. How did the strike impact your side of the business?
Terribly, drastically. I'm working on a show right now. I'm definitely blessed. I started working at the end of February. So I started end of February. The last show I worked on was 16 months prior to that show. I had 16 months of not working in the film industry.
Wow.
A lot of people don't realize it. A lot of people look at like, when did the strike officially happen? And when did it officially end? And that's how long the strike lasted. Well, that's not really how it works. The show I worked before the current show I'm on was Gotham Knights. I left Gotham Knights around like October, November. What people don't realize is that, first off, the industry in general kind of dies around like December, like Christmas time. And, it's like as the, like January and February go through and we get closer to spring, things pick back up. 2023, it never picked up. 2023, it was just dead the entire year. And more people were finishing their shows and there was nothing being greenlit. And then the strikes, because nothing was being greenlit because of the strikes. Because they knew it was like, oh, there's a good chance of a strike. We're not going to start a project and then have to pause it. They're like, we'd rather just wait till it's all over.
Well, and it was kind of like two strikes that sort of compounded one another, right? Because first it was the actors that went on strike, and then it was your union.
No. At first it was the writers that went on strike.
Well, the writers, right? And then the actors, and then and your union went on strike as well, right?
My union did not go on strike, but we were essentially on strike because there was no jobs.
Right. You're just locked with the other two.
We're just kind of like, it's unless you were lucky enough to be working on something that by the time the writer's strike was already written, and then by the time the actor's strike was already shot, and you were in post-production, you were just not working. I mean, I know people that, like me, haven't worked in over a year, and they're at this point getting to a year and a half of just not working.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and to go with that, a lot of people think that, oh, the strike ended and we're Gucci. Yeah, everything's better. No, it's not how it happened. First off, the actor strike ended around the end of like 2023. So film naturally goes into hibernation around that time period. They weren't going to greenlight anything for Christmas time. And then you're like, oh. And it's like, even now, because of the potential of an IATSE strike, which that's my union, that's me, and, like, IATSE is composed of, like, many locals, that, like, each local is something different. I'm 700, which that's, like editors, assistant editors, VFX editors, And then there's like, 600s like camera, and like there's like art directors and stuff like that. So there's the possibility of an IATSE strike that could happen this summer. So still, people are not greenlighting shows. And then there's even stuff that's like, like I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this well personally yet, but like with interest rates increasing, it's becoming harder and harder to get loans to make shows.
Mm.
So now it's like people are making less than they used to, and then there's also it's like kind of like the streamer bubble has burst. Streamers are not just throwing shows out into the void and like, let's see what sticks. Let's see what we get as the next big hit, next Stranger Things. It's not happening.
Well, and there's also just so many of them, right? I mean, there's Peacock, there's Paramount Plus, there's, there's all these different streaming platforms. When it was like, I remember distinctly a time when it was like Netflix, and then there was like cable.
Yeah.
And like some like early YouTube stuff. One of the things Jonas said was that for these larger production companies, their biggest competitor is YouTube, which I thought was interesting. Do you see more content shifting in that direction as these companies are kind of looking to diversify? Maybe they want to market differently. Maybe they want to put their budget somewhere else.
Yeah, YouTube is really weird because YouTube it's very strange. It is like it's a different beast, but it's a beast that needs to be talked about. YouTube and TikTok have created this ability for anyone to be an editor, which is great. But also when you have anyone being an editor, well, you don't need to pay a man from Bangladesh as much as you pay me.
Yeah.
So outsourcing then becomes
there's no rules either.
Exactly. And Bangladesh there's not as many labor laws. So it becomes a whole outsourcing thing. Now, other people would sit here and tell you, okay, well, that's not like really a concern because like they work on YouTube. Well, YouTube is becoming higher and higher quality. First off, YouTube's doing their own original films at this point. They're still continuing that. It's and like YouTube videos, PewDiePie and all these other content creators and like Markiplier and all that, their production quality is going up.
Yeah, Mr. Beast is like
Mr. Beast. I mean, yeah, Mr. Beast is a perfect example. The production quality is going up to the point where they're challenging some shows. Mr. Beast's version of Squid Games looked better than the one Netflix made.
It might have even made more money. I hate to say it.
There's a very real possibility.
Who knows? But so with that also, there's the matter of AI. Yeah. And you and I have talked about AI. Some people don't seem worried about it. Some people are. What do you feel about it as an assistant editor now working in VFX particularly? And what would you say the industry is thinking about it?
The industry's scared. I can tell you right now, most people I talk to in the industry are scared. And I understand why. This is a lot of, back in the last presidential election, Andrew Yang talked a lot about the AIs coming for your jobs. And it's, if AI can drive a semi, AI can assist and edit a TV show. And it's only a matter of time before it comes to the job of whoever's listening to this podcast. I do believe that AI is something that needs to be understood. It needs to be stopping AI is not going to happen. Like AI is not going to like we can't just sit here and be like, oh, no AI. That's not going to happen. That's not going to work. I'm actually currently using AI on my current show to help me speed up tasks. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, a job that used to take me that would have taken me, I don't know, 2 hours, I can now do in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Then that becomes.
But for now, it's there's like it's kind of a matter of learning how to utilize new technology. And I mean, to be fair, and this is another thing, I keep going back to my conversation with Jonas, but you know, at one point there was a guy that cut film together and that was the editor, you know, and then this new technology came around, you know, called a computer, which basically meant that that guy doing that job either has to learn the new technology or perish, you know? And so like I guess with AI though, I mean that's like a whole nother class of
Yeah,
technology. So I
yeah.
don't think it's like an apples to apples comparison per se.
It's not
Um,
adaptive because like and like a lot of people have had that talking point of like AI is not it's not I can't I am adapting to use AI as best as I can, but there will be a job shrinkage because of AI. Um, but it's one of those things, if you're established, if you're working, I think you'll be okay. I don't think it's coming for your job tomorrow. And if you want to join the film, if you want to join post production, you can. There's still jobs. Well, there still will be jobs like next year, and like especially once we get past the whole like IATSE conversation that's happening this summer, there will be jobs. People will get back to work. It's just where in an office you might have had a large team, you don't have that large team anymore. There's not like, you know, like, oh, this is Bill and he just kind of helps out anyone who's like struggling, which not every show even used to have that. But now it's like people like Bill just won't be there at all.
yeah, sort of ancillary positions are going to get axed first,
Yeah.
and then at that point, it's kind of at the mercy of how good the technology gets. I could imagine and to your point, actually, I could imagine a scenario where, let's say, the unions or the government put a hard stop on AI right here. We're not going to allow it to exceed this amount of effect in our industry. Well, guess what? Other countries are going to do it. Non-union people are going to do it.
Yeah.
YouTubers are going to do it. So there's just really no avoiding it. So I think it's an exciting time in many ways. It's a scary time. And I think it's just going to demand the next generation of people to really get a grip on it and quick.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
100%.
you've seen the clips coming out of Sora, like
Oh, yeah.
these 30-second 4K clips. I mean, it still looks a little wonky, but I mean,
It's
how
advanced a
far
lot
out
in
are
the
we?
past year.
Yeah,
I
are
mean,
we a year away from it looking, you know, unrecognizable from like real footage?
yeah.
So I think you know, some people say, oh, like we're still years out. And I feel like if I was in that industry, like my prerogative would be, well, I'm not going to take a chance, you
Oh
know?
no, don't take a chance. Like, you have to learn how to use this stuff without a doubt. Like if you sit here and you're like, oh, I'm just going to continue working like how I used to work in 2018. Well, you are going to get left behind, and that's scary. Like that is like a scary thing to say. I'm not trying to like downplay like the fear that like goes into that, but that's how it works. Like you like I'm still learning and I'm still trying to sit here and learn more and more the effects of AI and like how do I use AI to make my job easier? Because you know, if I can sit here and it's like, you know, oh, I'm at my desk, but I have the computer running everything for me and I just got to make sure the computer is running it right. Well, my job just became a lot easier. You know, like but like with your job becoming easier, what does that mean? Does that mean they're going to start paying you less? Well, that's where the union comes in. But it's like you said, outsourcing is a real thing, and outsourcing is a thing the union's definitely dealing with. And to be honest with you, that's why that's part of the reason why the union's kind of bringing back working in office, because it's like you can't outsource when you have to work in Los Angeles.
Right.
It's like you know, that's not even like a Bangladesh thing. That's Canada. Canada's taking a lot of jobs.
Yeah. I mean, during the strike, all of a sudden, all these German shows are getting recognition on Netflix. So, you know, for better or for worse, the industry seems to have these ways of flexing and adapting to these things. And sometimes it's at the expense of American jobs. So we're kind of we're a little low on time here, but I think it would probably be good, just in light of all the points we've touched on, to give somebody who is in the position that you were in, 5 or 6 years ago, um, some of your current takes on what they should be doing to prepare to enter the world of post production. Somebody that's aspiring to do that. If you have any thoughts or takeaways for that person.
So yeah, so for that person, for you listening, networking is key. But when you network, don't ask for a job. I've been asked for a job by complete strangers more times than I care to admit. And it doesn't get you a job. It just makes you kind of it makes you
Uncomfortable.
cringe. Like, to be honest with you, it's like my reputation, when I recommend someone for a job, my reputation is put on the line. And for you to ask me, I don't even know you. We've never met. This is the first time you're messaging me, and you're like, Matt, can you get me a job at Marvel? No, I can't. And like, I'm not going to. And that immediately in my head.
No, you don't understand, Matt. I have this big Iron Man poster in my room. Like, I was made for this job. Give me this job, Matt.
Yeah, I've actually heard that before. Like almost verbatim. But it's just one of those things. Like, you do not never ask for a job. What you want to say is like something along the lines of, hey, what you've done, what you've worked on is awesome. I love what you've worked on. Can I learn more about how you started working on that kind of stuff? I want to work on that stuff too. You say something along those lines, you're golden. And then as far as like your skill set, like your hard skills, YouTube, like YouTube's a great resource. There are other resources that are behind a paywall that you can use. But like YouTube's great. Joining Facebook groups, just join Facebook groups. And reach out to people and be like, hey, I'm gonna post on there, but hey, I'm brand new. I'm a complete newbie. I'm trying to learn how to do the type of editing, the type of system editing that they do on House of Dragon. And I really, or like The Mandalorian or something. And I really want that. So sitting here, like, do something like that, and you're good. As far as like other hard skills,
Well, the AI thing.
the AI thing is huge. Like, definitely, like, find out ways that people are using. That's probably the biggest thing you do. Find out ways people are using AI to get their job done. And really, like, the last thing is don't be a jerk. Just be humble, be learning, and be willing. And if that means you got to sit here and, like I've one thing that I'm really practicing, and I've been practicing, was the like falling gracefully. You mess up, hey, yo, I messed up, but I fixed it, and from like moving forward, I'm not gonna like I learned like my lesson from this mistake, and that's what you have to do. And yeah, because like you're gonna screw something up at some point. Everyone screws something up because we're not AI, we're people, and even my AI screws stuff up. To be honest with you, so
Right.
like it just be like like as like Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other, and like you will be okay. Just yeah, but yeah, that's really the biggest thing, and make sure that you really put yourself in a position to succeed. I've also had people tell me, "Oh, I want to do this, but I don't want to." But like, it would require me having to go to a meetup on Saturday, and I'm watching the Chargers game, or I'm watching the Cowboys play, and it's like, I look. If it's a championship game, I'm a sports guy. If it's a championship game, I get it. If it's a Super Bowl, I get it. If it's Champions League final, I get it. But you have to sit here and put priorities together. Like I've made sacrifices. The paint store, I've called out from the paint store to be a PA on The Bachelor. And that was risk I had to take. I could have lost my job at the paint store. I could have.
Shout out The Bachelor, by the way.
The shout out to The Bachelor. That's right. But I mean, just like you got to take some risk, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I can't do that because it inconveniences me in some way, or is a risky situation." Well, risks are a part of life. But yeah,
Well, particularly with entertainment, it's like you will not succeed unless you have skin in the game. That's just the way it is, you know.
there we go.
Matt Farrugia, thanks so much for
Mr.
being
Mac,
on the show. It was
I
it was an
appreciate
awesome,
you.
yeah, it was a good time, man. I'll send it over to you so I can get a free edit done, and we'll go from there.
There we go. There we go. Using the connects.
All right, take care, man.
See you.